people are always on about the dojo being like this bagpiping cult, but I think people are threatened by it because it's the opposite.
So, Andrew,
Hello, James.
I I'm trying to imagine a world in which Andrew Douglas maybe became an accountant, or
Yikes.
maybe he got really excited about Gantt charts and decided to go into project management. You
Okay.
know,
I like a good Gantt. I
some
like a good Gantt chart every now and then. I mean, I feel
well, hey,
like
who doesn't really?
for me personally, they are better in theory than in practice. But it's
Mm,
probably because I
mm,
haven't really mastered the Gantt chart yet.
yeah. Well, let's say you decided to really, instead of mastering the bagpipe, you decided to master the Gantt. What?
That's
So
it.
the world's a little different in this scenario. Why didn't you chase something else? And like, if you'd mastered the Gantt chart, would you be like, maybe you would have become a private consultant? Maybe you would have started a firm where you trained employees of other companies. Who knows what manifestation that kind of interest would have taken? But instead, you went with bagpipes. And you
Yeah.
didn't just go with bagpipes like most of us do, as in, oh, this is my hobby. I like doing it. Maybe I pick up some gigs and stuff. You started this internet school. Who sits there and just goes, I'm going to start an internet bagpipe school?
Yeah.
Who thinks of that? Is that what you thought, Andrew? Did you sit down and think to yourself, like, this internet thing's pretty exciting? Let's get some bagpipes on there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we can maybe dig back further into the past at some point, but yeah. So the actual online bagpipe school, which is what Dojo University is, the original idea came to me on my honeymoon in a pool in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, where I was just kind of thinking, and this would have been, when would this have been? 10, I got married in 2010. So it would have been like, you know, February of 2011, sitting in a pool. And I don't know if you remember 2011, Jim.
I also got married in 2010.
It's a good year.
Good year.
A good year for love.
Yeah, but I remember 2011. Yeah.
And anyway, I don't know if you remember things, but in the bagpipe world, there were some Skype lessons popping up. That
Mm-hmm.
was like one of the big things people were doing. They're doing the Skype lessons. And I just want to paint a picture, but nothing really beyond that. It's hard to picture a world without Zoom now, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't even remotely a thing in 2011. I'll tell you how I know that in just a moment. But I got to thinking, cool, Skype lessons are kind of neat. But what I always loved growing up, was piping school. I loved going to piping school and
As in
having,
like the sleepaway school kind of thing,
yes,
right? Like
exactly.
several weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd go along and you'd be fully immersed in this community of only pipers, and all the best pipers were there giving you lessons throughout the day. And you'd be having Kayleys, you'd be having a good time. There'd be a wealth of knowledge there. You'd learn a bunch of stuff and you'd make lifelong friends and stuff. I loved that as a kid. I looked forward to that every summer. Some summers I did like 3 weeks of piping camp during the summer. I'm just trying to think if there may have
Good
even been
childhood.
times I did more, but like it was great. That was like the highlight of the year, the thing I loved the most because it was fun. I mean, it was really fun. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I got a lot better at bagpiping while I was there, of course. But it was just tons and
Bonus.
tons of fun. But
Yeah.
anyway, as Skype lessons are coming out, I just remember kind of thinking to myself, like, I want to recreate that, the piping school experience. I want to recreate that on the internet. What would
So
that?
rather than recreating the one-on-one experience, you wanted to recreate the community experience kind of
Well,
thing.
maybe. I mean, I don't know. I don't know exactly how I got to the idea, but the idea would be like, yeah, what if we could do classes on the internet? And obviously, already Facebook and stuff was happening. Like, you can definitely create, groups and communities. So for me, I was just kind of thinking that would be really cool. Now, we'll have to go back further in the past, but that's how the online school thing got started. My wife, as basically everybody did at that time, was kind of like, yeah, okay, honey, have another drink, buddy.
Was that like
Uh,
on the honeymoon? You're sitting there in the
yeah,
hot tub, you're like, sweetie, I just had the best idea. And she's
yeah,
like, okay, you're three
yeah,
mojitos deep right now, so let's
exactly,
just wait till the morning.
exactly
Gotcha.
right. But no, the idea kind of stuck, and we didn't always do it the way we did now. The first iteration of the dojo, some OGs may remember, we kind of had like a semester system. We had 4 or 5 people, like Jack Lee comes to mind, Callum, Beaumont, Glenn Brown, Mark Saul did one, Rab Matheson did one. That was maybe the first time I really met Rob Matheson, was at this first iteration of our online piping school. because
Mm,
he agreed to do it. And we're like, whoa, okay, Rab Matheson, awesome. And then what we did 10-week like semesters. So people would pay
mm.
money and they would have 10 weeks to come sit down with these great players, which at the time was extremely groundbreaking. And I'm sort of glad to say that it's sort of commonplace now in the world, isn't it? That you can sit
Mm.
down with Rab Matheson on Zoom. But I think that, the dojo really helped pave the way for that. We've had some imitation is the finest form of flattery moments as well over the years where a lot of people have done their best to replicate what the dojo does.
That's
And to the
proof you're
point
doing
now.
something that's good, right?
Yeah. Oh, I think so. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty cool. And it went really well. And then after the semesters were cool, but then at some point, by the way, I don't know if you remember 2011, but you know how nowadays people have on average 40 subscriptions coming out of their monthly budget,
Yeah, it's all
myself
subscriptions.
included.
I subscribe to my groceries. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, back in 2011, that wasn't a thing. So we were kind of on the
Right.
cutting edge of the subscription model thing as well. So
In
eventually we
2011,
discovered,
you could still buy Photoshop.
yeah,
That
exactly.
was
Yeah, you
nice.
can't buy Photoshop anymore. You can't, I mean, and you got your Netflix, you got your Apple TV, you got your groceries.
Yeah.
Amazon's trying to get you to subscribe to like your batteries. And it's like, dear Lord.
Yes. Yeah.
I actually have a coffee subscription. So I'm a bit of a coffee nerd. And I actually have
So
a
all of
coffee
this,
subscription. Jim, I'm
yeah.
not done yet. Hang on. I want to tell
Sorry.
you about my coffee subscription. I've got a coffee subscription. It's different, Jim. I wish I had thought of this. And as a matter of fact, I don't know. You could do it with seasoning. But anyway, my coffee subscription, it comes with a scale that hooks into my Wi-Fi so that when I get to a certain weight of coffee, it automatically sends the next coffee in my queue to me. So it's
That's pretty
consumption
sick.
based. It's not time based, it's consumption based subscription. It's
Mm.
incredible, Jim. It's incredible. I wish I had thought of that.
Okay, wait. Adrian Melvin or
Read
Chris
makers? Are you
Apps or any read maker do that. And so like as I reach up and take a read from my box of reads, when it can sense that we're down to 1 or 2 reads, I get 8 more reads.
yeah,
But are you telling me, Andrew, that all of
incredible.
this subscription world actually all goes back to the Piper's Dojo? You started it,
The
and
dojo, we started it.
it's your fault.
No, we didn't start it, but we definitely, in the piping world, and by the way, viewers, please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not trying to brag, but I wouldn't be surprised if we were the first bagpipe subscription program. Certainly educational. Are there any product-based subscriptions in the bagpipe world? I don't know. So we were probably the first. Yeah,
I
another
can't think of any
person.
product-based subscriptions. What would it be anyway? Rolls of hemp, maybe?
I think, I think another person that I admire in this sort of technology bagpipe space is Yori Chisholm, who has bagpipelessons.com and another amazing resource. But I think I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, apologies. I think Dojo did subscriptions before Yori did, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure actually. Now that I've said it out loud to thousands of people, now I'm really starting to get nervous. I have that wrong. But anyway,
That's
yeah,
the
we were
best
sort
way
of,
to workshop an idea is
yeah,
out loud to thousands
put
of
it out
people.
there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that idea, it's still alive today. That's still basically what we're doing at the dojo is we have an online bagpipe school. But what I mean when I say bagpipe school is we're going for that summer camp kind of feel, but we do it year round. We're hopefully integrating into people's daily lives a little bit, just like Netflix kind of integrates into people's daily lives a little bit. But then it's a piping school that you can go to without having to drive 8 hours and stay in crappy dorm rooms and eat. A lot of the elements are better because you're doing it from the comfort of home and you've got that. I mean, we're even better than private lessons in many respects, in my opinion, just one man's opinion. Like private lessons are awesome, right? It's like you can get together. I can sit down with a great piper and we can have one-on-one, hands-on time together. But dojo is better than that in some ways, in my opinion, just because it's possible to access this community and these experts on a daily basis. It's possible. It's fairly painless. We're a community. We support each other and we're always kind of there. And so I think that's cool. I think it's a great supplement
That
to private instruction as well.
you mentioned how like the iterations of the dojo have been different over time. And I remember the first time that I joined Piper's Dojo, because I was one, this probably happens for a lot of people, where I joined for a while and was using it for a while, then I stopped using it for a while and left, and then joined again later. And I
Yeah.
think the first time, maybe it was the second time I joined, there was a badges and belts. Was it just badges?
Yeah. No, there was
Uh,
both. Yeah. The badges and
yeah,
belts. Yeah,
badges and
that
belts
sounds.
system.
Yeah.
And so there have been different things, and even
Yeah.
just recently you rolled out the Dojo Insider product. Like you're
Yes.
trying different things. So I wonder if an observation, maybe an overview of the ideas that didn't last and the ideas that stuck. I wonder if that would be informative in any way. Anything that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Process.
Yeah. I certainly subscribe to the idea that you want to iterate and you want to try these ideas rapidly and see if they're going to be successful. And the ones that are
Mhm.
successful stick around, and the other ones, we try to get rid of. But we've gone through a lot of iterations. Software was the big one. Back when we started this, there was no Zoom. Communication was one-to-one still on the internet, and you had to look hard to find any sort of conferencing ability. So we started with just two bros. So Dojo U started with the help of two bros who had this online magical conferencing system, which actually worked kind of good considering, but it was super not ideal yet. It was all very sandboxy.
Sometimes when you need something, the
You just
best
got
the
it.
best place to go is two bros.
Two bros.
You got to get a
Exactly.
couple bros working on that, and you'll get a solution.
Yes, exactly. And then eventually we ended up on Adobe Connect, which is basically like the military decided to sell their conferencing software to consumer. So we did Adobe Connect for a long time, which was pretty awesome. And then
Hmm.
and then Zoom has sort of become the industry standard, and for good reason. It's by far
Mhm.
the best conferencing software. And it's not always obvious why Zoom is the best, but it is. Yeah, at least at this time, Zoom is still the best. It does all the little things pretty darn well. And it's
Hmm.
got special audio stuff that bagpipers can use to actually be able to hear each other properly and all that stuff. So
Yes, that's important.
it's got an API, which is important, so it's all good stuff. We like it. So,
So it
but
has
anyway,
made all of my Google searches for technical support for my favorite handheld microphones very
yes,
confusing, since those are
yes,
made by another company called Zoom. Yeah.
it is somewhat confusing. Yeah. So anyway, and then we've gone through the different websites and stuff like that. I mean, I think one of the things that I did, or one of the things that I brought to the table was I'm not like a genius computer savvy guy, but I'm pretty good with technology and with computers and with figuring out how you would connect things together to do the stuff that you need to do, which is, fairly rare in the piping world for technology to work well. It does happen, but it's fairly rare.
Hmm.
And so to be able to combine some of these ideas was important. Yeah, and we tried a
That
little bit
makes
of
sense.
like,
Yeah.
we tried some gamification stuff on the website for a while, like the belts and the badges. But the
Hmm.
idea behind the belts and the badges was real world piping achievements. As you accumulate them, that would improve your status in the game. You could get your next belt by achieving certain things and things that we think would be important to achieve. Didn't really, I mean, it was somewhat successful and interesting, but we just didn't really stick with it at the
Hmm.
dojo. We didn't really stick with it. It's not like the freedom phases, which, was a relatively simple idea that now we've really baked into our overarching process. But of course, we also try not to do too much. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. So,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
like the freedom phase process is there. It's part of the backbone of our methodology. But really, it's about having fun together and playing music together online.
I don't mean to put you on the spot. If nothing comes to mind, I can edit this part out. But I am curious if there are any ideas that either were put into practice and were such a rapid and complete failure that they were pulled out of practice, or that were
Ooh.
presented or came to your mind or anything like that, that were so wildly bad that they never came into play. Is there a graveyard of dojo ideas that there would be a particularly ugly
Uh,
ambassador living in that graveyard that we could pull forth?
no. I mean, there's really not.
All good ideas all the
I
time.
mean, I think bad ideas die so rapidly at the dojo
Mm.
that there haven't been that many terrible ideas. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we do that some people might disagree with, especially from a methodological standpoint. We
Mm,
teach with the metronome quite a bit,
yeah.
which which there's a certain group of pipers that are like, why are you playing with that metronome? That's just silly talk. You can't be a good piper and have good timing, I guess is their argument. But yeah, so sometimes there's stuff that we do that people don't like. I teach that we need to learn how to tune properly, otherwise known as, we're very not for the digital tuner approach to tuning and stuff like that. And so there's lots of little things like that, but I would argue you'd get that anywhere. Everybody has
Mm-hmm.
different things that they do that's a little different from, the way you're quote unquote supposed to do it. So there's always things like that, but I don't think there's any terrible ideas that have been complete flops. If
Mm.
I'm sure people will remind me if I'm wrong about that. Maybe I've blocked them out of my mind.
That's right.
Yeah.
Put it in the comments. Let us know which ones do you think are the most terrible dojo ideas.
Yeah. Everything's worth a try though. Everything's worth
Yeah.
a try. And then you have to put it, you put it forward and you see, what the problems are with that idea. There's no perfect idea, I don't think.
Mm.
You're just kind of iterating and seeing, what's going to work the best for what you're trying to do.
Do you have to consciously make an effort to try things though? Just especially where a business is concerned, where it's public facing and stuff like that. Maybe this is just my own insecurity speaking, but I feel like it can be so hard to take that step of putting a thing into practice. And the few times in my own life where I have, often by accident, actually just tried doing a thing, it actually turned out to be the best way to make that thing what it needed to become, because you actually can you can iron out the kinks pretty quickly once it's out there. But man,
Yep.
I sure get stuck in the thinking about, well, I want to, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it perfectly. So I'm going to lay all the groundwork first, I end up not doing it. So
I,
do you have to think to yourself, oh, I want to prep more, but I'm not going to, I'm just going to do it because that's the way to
yes,
do things.
for sure. That's something I've always done naturally pretty well anyway. You just, I think it's a fear of failure that causes perfectionism, maybe, or at least it's a big part of it. So, if
Yeah.
you're afraid that you might fall flat on your face, then that makes you want to prepare and prepare and prepare and prepare before you let anybody see your work, right?
Yeah, totally.
But for me, that's sort of a fallacy. And of course, you're going to fail and fall flat on your face. You might as well get it over with.
Just plan on doing so, huh?
Yeah, for sure. And it's going to be a little bit clunky and it's always going to be a little bit clunky and a little
Yeah.
bit crappy, but you got to get it out there. You got to see if it'll take or not. You got to see if it's a good idea. I'd rather
Mm.
execute on something small and imperfect without a huge investment of time. I'd rather see if that has potential than to spend, years on a magnum opus and then hope it doesn't flop,
Hmm.
which by the way, it's going to flop a little bit. That's been my
So,
experience.
Andrew, where the Piper's Dojo is today, are there any threads that you see going back to childhood? Like, were you like
Yes.
organizing clubs when you were in high school? Were you delegating tasks to your friends? Were you teaching people
Yeah.
to play pipes pretty early on?
I think for me, in addition to learning piping and having a, really successful pathway through learning how to pipe really good. It was a long string of fortuitous things. Like my dad was a great piper, so he taught me great technique. He got us involved in a band that was really all about education and super forward thinking in the Mohawk Valley Phrasers pipe band. And through Mohawk Valley Phrasers pipe band, we got connected with Orrin Moore and Donald Lindsay. And then Donald was my teacher for years, but introduced me to people like Jim McGilvery and Jack Lee and stuff through the Invermark schools and so on and so forth. And so moving on forward into all the great things. So I did all that. But throughout that whole process, I personally was always interested in what's really going on here. All of this advice that you get seems very disparate in the sense or disconnected, or, you get one guy's telling you this thing about shaving reeds, and this guy's telling you never shave a reed, and that guy's telling you use a rubber band, and this guy's saying pinch it, and that guy's saying don't pinch it, and this guy's saying hold the D, and this guy's saying heavy D throw, this guy's saying light D throw. But like for me, I was always kind of like, I don't know what you would call it, but I was always trying to get to the bottom of, okay, what's really going on here? And being interested in what's really going on here has been the guidepost of our dojo methodology, which, if there was no internet, the dojo methodology would still be successful because we're the only methodology that I know of that's really trying to get to the bottom of things and present bagpipe stuff in as objective as possible a way. You know what I mean? There's still stuff that great pipers and great teachers are doing where to me it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
We're really focused on getting it to trying to get it to make sense. It's what we're focused on internally.
Making it make sense.
Yep. And then that's what the student needs as well. We need it to make sense. Like bagpiping is easier said than done, but hang on a second. It's usually not even easily said. It's usually a hot mess and makes no sense. So if we can get it to make sense for people, then we can really spend time on working to actually get it done and being able to do it.
Yeah.
But it's amazing.
I think it's interesting that.
Go ahead, Jim.
Oh, well, just that you had the disposition, I guess, to look at these different points of view or suggestions that were being presented as, just the way it has to be, but they weren't consistent. Yeah. There's that. But then if you hadn't been, like you say, through various fortuitous circumstances, presented with all of these different kinds of advice via the piping schools and different teachers and different bands and stuff, then you wouldn't have known that there were different ideas.
Correct.
And I think that's actually the experience for a lot of pipers, that we only have one teacher, we only have one pipe major. And so one version of how to bagpipes is the only thing we ever have exposure to. And so we just take that as, oh, this is how you do it.
Yep. And it's another reason Dojo University is so cool. And it's not a coincidence. That's a major part of what we do, which is, at this point, I think we have 20 classes a week or something with all different instructors. And you've got, we've got so many different points of view. So you don't have that naivety that you would have in a model where you only have one private instructor that's taking you through everything. By the way, a good private instructor is going to introduce you to a lot of points of view, but not all private instructors are good, unfortunately.
Yeah. And what part of the hard thing there is, I know that when I've been a not good private instructor, I'm not saying I'm a good instructor now either.
Yeah. But by the way, let me just interrupt and say, I don't think I am the best private instructor. It's just another thing that's led to the way that we do things at the dojo is I don't like teaching private lessons. It doesn't make any sense. There's so many problems with it, and I'm not sure I'm the best guy for the job. So, I operate way better in a one-to-many model, and that's not the same for everybody. But just when you were saying all the times I did bad stuff as a private instructor, it's like, yeah, me too. It's a hard thing to do well. Anyway, carry on, Jim.
I think I'm going to be met with every student I ever taught on my way to the pearly gates. And if they'll let me through, maybe I'll make it to heaven. But I don't think that they're going to have good reason to let me through. But part of the reason, I'd like to think maybe a big part of the reason for the things that I taught people poorly is precisely that my experience was and this is nothing on my own. My instructors have been wonderful and my pipe majors too. But only having had the experience of one instructor, one pipe major, maybe two pipe majors because of another one years later kind of thing, I had a narrow idea of what bagpiping was to then regurgitate to my students, right?
Exactly.
And so it gets perpetuated, the sort of narrowness does.
And we all know that. We know that from other walks of life, right? That narrow-minded people, we don't have a lot of time for them, right? And by the way, they might not be narrow-minded because they're bad. It just might be because they never, got the experience that they needed and all that stuff. And yeah, I'm a big believer in that, Jim. And I don't have time for narrow-minded pipers either, right? We should always be trying to find interesting new ways of thinking about things. That should always be something that we're interested in. Yeah. And we should be generally interested in all the points of view. And, some people think there's such a thing as wet blowers, and I'm just not sure.
Reignite the debate.
Yeah. I'm also not sure the heavy D throw is the right D throw. I think the light D throw is better. But that's just me. And when someone comes and says, I think the heavy D throw is better, I'm going to listen to what they're saying and I'm going to incorporate it into my own personal model of things so that I have the most well-rounded view that I can. Anyway, point
Yeah.
being, that's the sort of attitude we're trying to foster here in the dojo school, which is funny because, people are always on about the dojo being like this bagpiping cult. But I think people are threatened by it because it's the opposite, right? We have an extremely open-minded situation here where people are coming on and sharing a lot of different points of view, and students can get a lot of different points of view. And then, ideas can be criticized as well. Have you ever been to a piping school where if to criticize something somebody says would obviously be something you would never want to attempt?
Oh, I
Because,
feel immediately socially awkward about even just imagining such a thing, but that might
yeah,
be one of my own hangups
yeah,
also coming into play. I
that's
really
right.
avoid conflict as much as I can. So,
Well, and I mean, I'm just talking about criticism. It can be difficult to do, and we try to make sure that criticism is embraced as much as reasonably possible.
mm.
You know, I don't know.
So you kind of recently wrote a book, the Finding Bagpipe Freedom book,
Feels like a long
but
time
like,
ago, though.
yeah, I can dig that for sure. But it's not where you started. I am curious. Can you think of a reason why? Because I feel like another person in a similar position, having had this similar experiences with bagpiping and wanting to educate, have a way to disseminate ideas, they might have started with a book and maybe built up some kind of community or learning thing based off of the book. This
Yeah.
seems like you went the other way around. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think what you see in Finding Bagpipe Freedom is somewhat complete, but also still somewhat incomplete. Just a combination of, or the culmination of a lot of the stuff that we've been thinking about and doing over the years. The original one, I can remember it clear as day. I was still in university, or would have been close to the end of university, and I was just not paying attention during one of the recitals because I was thinking about how the way we learn bagpipes doesn't make much sense.
Hmm.
And that, the way we would typically learn bagpipes would be in a linear fashion. Do this, and then do this, and then do this, and then do this. And then at somewhere down the line, you're going to be playing bagpipe tunes as a bagpiper. But that's not really it at all. And my theory or thesis was that it's more of a layered thing. The way I think
Hmm.
about bagpipes is way more layered. And then therefore, that's probably how we should be teaching the bagpipes. So we started off with this thing called the anatomy, which was basically, it started off with just the skeleton of bagpipe music, which was just the melody notes. So I put together a series of exercises and simple melodies and tunes with no grace notes as the
Hmm.
first layer. And then the next layer of things I thought was grace notes, but then I thought again, actually, it's not grace notes. The next layer is G grace notes specifically. And by the way,
Hmm.
I highly doubt I'm the first person in history to think of this. But in my mind, as far as I was concerned, it was a fairly original idea. So we do the G grace notes next. So then you take the same exercises you've already done, you add the G grace note layer in. And then round 3 was you would add supporting grace notes in addition to the G grace notes was layer 3. And then finally layer 4. And again, this is all building on the same exercises, right? And then in
Wait,
round
I'm
4,
curious. Was it skeleton, muscles, veins, skin?
something like that. It was skeleton. I don't remember. Yeah.
That's
I
okay.
don't,
I was just
I
I was
don't,
just mildly curious, but yeah,
no, but it was called the anatomy originally. And fun,
yeah.
kind of a fun story. I mean, I remember Maureen Connor, when I moved back to New York, she loved it. She made photocopies of it. And that's for a long time how we taught the kids how to play. Like a lot of those kids'
Hmm.
bands, which then was called the Scotia Glenville Band. I mean, a lot of those kids learned on the anatomy, which was cool. It was kind of proof of concept, like, oh, this is actually really successful and really kind of interesting. A lot of those players made it all the way up into more and more. I don't know if those players originally
Thematically,
learned it.
if you'd
What?
stuck with that, then maybe today we'd have the Piper's clinic or something like medical, maybe rather than a dojo.
Yep.
As far as
Uh,
themes go, I mean.
yeah, but that was the first thing where I was like, okay, the way we usually do this doesn't make sense. What would make more
Hmm.
sense? And then I kind of wrote that out and started teaching people that way, and it was pretty cool and interesting. Another thing that I thought doesn't really make a lot of sense is the private lesson model of teaching. So that was
Mm.
pretty early on. So I think I graduated university in, I want to say 2007, 6. Yeah, 7. We're gonna go with 7 because I know my first season with Oren
There's
Moore
no way to
was
check, so yeah, just
2008.
go
No, there
7.
is. You
Oh,
check based on the Worlds. So in 2007, I played with SFU at the Worlds. In 2008, we played with Oren Moore in grade 2 at the Worlds, and I think we took 3rd or maybe 4th at the Worlds. I can't remember in grade 2. But I would have moved back to New York, early in 2008. Okay, and then I remember having chats with Donald Lindsay. Donald Lindsay and I used to travel around to various bands throughout the Northeast, and we would kind of do 2-man workshops with a lot of bands. It was fun times, and we would have a lot of chats, obviously, and I would kind of discuss how the private lesson of model of teaching has definite downsides. And I won't bore you with what all the downsides were, mainly because I'm not sure I can remember what they were, but I know they're there. And then I was saying, well, when I was a kid, we did the whole karate dojo thing, which I think was a
mm,
really kind of effective model for learning because you kind of with a group of people, you're making friends. You can learn by observing what other people are doing and learning from their mistakes. People who aren't super advanced can be at least somewhat involved in helping the beginners do the absolute beginnery stuff. And it's more of a community-based thing, blah, blah, blah. And then I remember Donald telling me, you have to try this and you have to build this. And so
did
I was
Donald
like,
say it? Did Donald say you could call it the Piper's
yes. Well,
Dojo?
and eventually it was like, cool. Well, we could do it. I bet you Mary from the church would give us some space and sure enough, she did. So the dojo started at St. Andrew's Church in Albany. But so we could get some space, probably wouldn't be that expensive. And, we know a bunch of students who I bet you would come out to this thing. And then eventually it was like, well, what should we call this thing? And Donald was like, it's obvious what you have to call this. You have to call it the Piper's Dojo. And so, which by the way, the first time you hear it is like ultra cheesy. So I think it took a little bit of guts to even just start with that. But the problem is once we got started and it took off and we started to become known as the dojo, then
Mm.
we're stuck with that name forever. So there you go. But by the way, it's a good name. We can get into why. But anyway, just to complete the history, the Piper's Dojo actually started off as an in-person thing where we tried to
Mm.
teach bagpipes in the Albany area, similarly to how a karate dojo might teach karate. That was basically what it was. And then over time, I started selling bagpipe supplies at the
Mm.
in-person dojo. But like I have the supplies, I might as well also put them up on the internet. So we started an online supplies little website as well to sell some additional supplies. Over time, started to come up with these crazy ideas like, well, we've got this website, it's going pretty good. Maybe we should offer a couple of online classes on the website and start to have these ideas like maybe you should do an online school, kind of like a summer school, going back to our earlier story. And then the rest is history. You can sort of see how it might have evolved from there. But yeah, going back to the thing with the dojo, I actually still kind of like the name. The dojo is sort of a place where you go to discover yourself and learn to master yourself, right? I
Mm.
mean, so it's still the same. It's still kind of what we believe in generally for pipers as well. I mean, we're trying to master our minds and our bodies in order to be able to express ourselves. It's still what we're doing. Like it's still very dojo. Like the word still makes sense in the context of what we're doing. And by the way, Dojo University was just like a cheesy thing that we decided to call this online thing that we were doing, like the learning component. But the word university still, it's not a real university, but whereas like a university is like a higher learning institution, right? Where we are investigating the why behind things quite a bit and, how things are actually supposed to work. And we're trying to
Mm.
find objective solutions to known problems. These are things you would do at a university, and these are the same things that you would do at our online piping school too. It's like, we want to investigate what's really going on here in order to make us better. So Dojo University, it's still what we're called, and it kind of works for me still.
The tagline could be something like cheesy stuff that kind of works for Andrew.
Yeah, exactly.
I do
Well,
think,
like cheesy. Well, going back to, ideas that stick or don't stick. I mean, weirdly, dojo has stuck, totally stuck. I
yeah, it has
remember,
stuck. There's the proof, right?
yeah, I remember when we kind of went official with the business. Like Carl Donnelly joined me as a partner in the business, and we decided we were going to really go for it and try and build it into a real business. Like originally it was just kind of my hustle,
Mm.
and then we decided to make it more of a proper company. And I remember at that time we discussed a variety of different names for the business,
Mm.
but it's like people know us as the dojo. I mean, it is what it is. This is what we are, and that's
Mm.
how the name kind of stuck.
Did you ever consider in those early days like a franchise model where it would stay in person and you'd send the program out so there'd be
Hmm.
different dojo locations in different places?
Yep. Yep. Exactly. The challenge with a franchise model is that the methodology that we've developed is very important. And if you were to franchise it, you would need to know for sure that your methodology was specifically the
Mm.
one being taught and not a lot of the methodologies that people would default to would not be acceptable. I mean, are they bad? Not necessarily, but a big part of the dojo is how we approach it and how we think about it. And so
Mm.
that's the trouble with the franchise model. Yeah. You'd have to get serious about making sure that the proprietors of these franchises were actually teaching the methodology. McDonald's wouldn't be a successful franchise if everybody that owned each McDonald's kind of did things their own way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So, looking at these different iterations and the way that the dojo kind of came into existence and has changed over time and probably will continue to kind of just, kind of evolve over time. Just
It
as of,
will. One thing I can promise is that, yeah, we'll continue to evolve. Because if we don't put ourselves out of business, somebody else is going to.
mm, yeah, there you go. So then not locking you in to keeping this forever because evolution will happen, but just as of today, as the dojo exists in its current iteration today, what's like the elevator pitch to describe what it is, what it does, why it exists?
Yeah. Good question. I mean, why don't you tell me? I don't know what it is. No, we're an online bagpipe school. That's it.
It's good.
I mean, and then what else do you want to know? It's like, oh, do you have who teaches at your online school? Well, the best players in the world,
The best of the
basically.
best.
Yeah. And
There we
then
go.
if they're not, and if the best players aren't teaching regularly, they're at least on every now and then as guests. It's
They
all
pop in now and again.
yeah, like where is this school? Well, it's wherever you have internet. How often are there classes? Several times a day. So
Especially if
it's
you want to watch the videos that are on there too, anytime.
yeah. So it's a piping school. It's a community that's just always at your fingertips. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Come on. It's pretty cool, right?
It's
Like
pretty
it's
cool.
easy. It's easy to go to bed and stress out about details about the business, but the big picture is pretty cool. By the way, another thing that's pretty cool about it is it's only somewhat me at this point. We have a big team of people. It's become a big thing of its own, which is pretty cool. Maybe, hopefully, when I die, it's going to keep going. It's going to
Mm.
hopefully it's going to become like, you know, something that's a mainstay in the piping world forever.
Yeah,
That would be cool, right?
that'd be cool. Cool legacy.
A little bit, like we're a little bit fringy in certain respects, and we're going to think things through and we're going to figure out what's really going on here and what the actual truth, for lack of a better word, of how we should approach these things really is. For example, you should use a metronome when you're learning how to play the bagpipes. Sorry, it just all evidence points in that direction. If you're Jim, you're not going to try to end the episode on that, are you? That would just be cruel. You're doing the awkward pause at the end of the episode there.
No, actually, the other day I was scrolling social media and I can't remember what amazing musician it was now, but they said something about the value of a metronome and it was really well put. And I thought, oh, that's awesome. I should share that with Andrew. And then I looked up and I realized that it was being shared by the Piper's Dojo account. Like, oh,
Yes,
he already knows
that
about
was
it.
me. Yeah,
Yeah.
there was that Bella Fleck post about the metronome. But anyway,
That's
it's
what
like,
it was.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't think the metronome is for you, come check out Dojo U and give it a little try. Work with me here for a couple weeks. You know, people get better. Like when they go to the dojo, they get better at playing bagpipes. It's very
Yeah.
strange. It's very strange, but it definitely, and better in all the right ways too. Like better as a musician, more confident, having more
Mhm.
fun.
Yeah.
Oh, suddenly I can do a couple of things that I wasn't able to do before and I'm having fun now. Ah, very
Mhm.
nice. Anyway, Jim, you're giving me that look like we should wrap this up. And anyway, those are my thoughts. That's what the dojo's all about, in one man's opinion, I
Yeah.
suppose. And I suppose I might be slightly biased.
Well, if anybody was slightly biased, you'd have good reason to be. That'd be understandable. But
If I wasn't biased in favor of my business, that would be a bad sign.
might be a
But
little,
yeah. Hey, Jim, don't take my word for it. Read a book. I'll let you put a little reading rainbow.
That was the rainbow. That was the rainbow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, Andrew Douglas here from the Piper's Dojo, and I just want to say thanks so much for listening to today's iteration of the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, it would be super helpful to us and to a lot of bagpipers out there trying to find us. If you could give us a top-notch review on whatever platform you're using to listen to this podcast, particularly Apple, iTunes, and Spotify and things like that, your review would be really, really helpful. So if you have a moment today, definitely go over there and help us out. Other than that, until we meet again on the podcast or somewhere else, thanks again for listening.